I think being a snowflake is
being sensitive and being protected from everything by your guardians.
I think it means that you're delicate.
Being very sensitive.
Being unique.
Being creative.
being overprotected, having opportunities like handed to us, like not working for them, like taking offence to things that we really shouldn't.
The younger generations are known as the snowflake generation, and we are going to get some more insight into what this means. The snowflake generation is now the most commonly used term for young generations of today. Today, we interviewed a teacher at the Henley College in South Oxfordshire, England, to hear her opinion on the subject as she talks to many students on a daily basis.
I think your generation and the younger generation, the so-called millennials, if you like, are a snowflake generation because you're all very entitled. For one, you think you deserve everything. You don't want to try. As a generation, you don't like to be challenged. You don't like to be told you're wrong, and you certainly don't like to work hard to get somewhere in life. And I think that's probably why the snowflake generation is called what it is. On top of that, we've got this new wave of mental illness coming through, and everybody talks about it now, whereas my generation and generations before that, everybody suffered but nobody spoke about it. And it's great that everybody speaks about it now, but I think it's become trendy, if you like, to have anxiety. It's become trendy to have depression. So now a person of your generation, of your age, can just turn around and say, well, I have anxiety, and everybody else has to step back and go, okay, we'll wrap you up in cotton wool, when really I think people need to learn that life is tough, and us wrapping you up in cotton wool is only going to make things worse.
I believe that the younger generations are becoming more fragile and sensitive as time's going on. In my opinion, there is certainly an increase in mental health problems with young people, and primarily I believe that comes from loss of a sense of connection, both with others but certainly within themselves.
What led to the development of this so-called snowflake generation is my parents, people of my parents' age, who grew up working very hard. They did have a tough life, and what they want for their children and their grandchildren is for them to have an easier life, and I completely understand that. I'm the same with my children. I will do everything I can to make their life better and make their life easier, but there's a point where we need to step back and say, well, are we doing more damage than good? Are we protecting your generation a bit too much? And therefore future generations, I don't know what society is going to be like if we carry on the way we are, purely because you don't cope as well with real life, and real life hasn't changed. It's still very tough out there, but we are still wrapping you up in cotton wool. So when you do leave education and you do start to go to work, your generation are crumbling quite a lot.
The factors that come into play when looking at the snowflake generation, I believe, come from the introduction of the internet and using screens for so many hours of the day. When we look at children and young people perhaps 20 years ago, there was a much bigger emphasis on their interpersonal relationships and on their emotional development being much more stable. What we have now are young children and young adults coming through that seem to be a lot more fragile, less resilient, less able to stand up and take criticism, less able to jump back, really. Their bounce back ability is much less. My belief that this has come from having interactions with screens. Everything's available instantaneously. It's flick to the right, flick to the left. Instead of being able to go and find information, instead of being able to persevere and work towards something and get a sense of achievement, everything is very instantaneous.
I think it massively affects your daily life because, like I said before, you can't cope. And I'm saying you, I'm generalising here. Yes, there are people your age that can cope very well and have a tough life and have to just crack on with it. But as I've been a teacher now for 9 years, I think this is a generation, it's getting progressively worse. And like I say, when you can't cope with day-to-day activities and day-to-day life, or a teacher or somebody just saying, you know what, that doesn't work, and it becoming a massive issue, parents are calling in because I've upset children, I've upset their son or daughter because I've said something negative about their work and stuff like that. If that carries on, like I said, we're in trouble.
I think being a snowflake is not having the ability to bounce back, having very little resilience, having a sense of entitlement and a blown up sense of uniqueness and specialness.
It has impacted me in my teaching. I've had to change my style of teaching. I've had to change the way I teach because I'm not allowed to say anything negative anymore at fear of upsetting somebody. Whereas when I grew up and I was at school, I went to a very strict school, and if I did something wrong, I said something out of line, my homework was not done, I was absolutely told, and I had to deal with that. I had to suffer the consequences of my actions. My mum tells me stories all the time in her generation of how she got the cane or the slipper, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to bring that back, but she's grown up with morals. She's grown up knowing that there's a deadline. I've grown up knowing that if I don't do something, I will get told off for it. If my work is not good enough, I expect to be told. And even now in my job, I've done something wrong, I expect my bosses to tell me that that's wrong, and I want to improve.
My belief is that it does need to change. We need to have mechanisms in place to support young people and children coming through. Because I think with our generation certainly, which is the generation that went before, when the internet and computers were introduced, we had no idea that the downside of it would be a whole generation of young people that had lost connection. They had connection with the wider world through the World Wide Web, but what they didn't have is connection with each other and themselves, and that's what's happened. But on the surface, to the outside world, pretending that we're actually unique and important, but inside there's something huge missing.
I believe this is something that needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed quickly, very quickly. Again, repeating myself, if we carry on like this, society is going to crumble. We can't carry on with generations that don't know how to be criticised. We can't carry on with generations saying, you can't speak to me like that, or you can't tell me that my work is wrong because I've worked hard for it. Yes, you've worked hard, work harder, we all have to work harder. And if we carry on like this, our economy, our society is going to crumble. And the way the world is at the moment, we're going into war. Our governments aren't the best they've ever been. You guys need to be stronger than you are if you're going to survive in society and you're going to survive in future. So yes, it has to change. It has to change quick.
According to MQ, 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health issues on a daily basis. £150 million is spent on mental health research per year.
I think this generation is more sensitive than the previous generation because the previous generation has gone through a lot more, like the war, and they don't want us to go through that again.
Also, previous generations have been raised to be tough. We've sort of been raised just in a normal way where we've just been told sort of, good job, we actually haven't had like discipline or anything.
What does it mean to be a snowflake?
Weak-minded. Sensitive.
Taking things to heart.
Offended easily.
According to the insurance firm Aviva, 72% of 16 to 24-year-olds think the term is used unfairly, while 74% think that it could have a negative effect on young people's mental health. Almost half of adults aged between 16 and 24 said they have encountered stress or anxiety, compared to just over a third of all UK adults. So there are some facts and opinions on the matter, and now it's up to you to decide on what you want to do with this information. Do you think teenagers and young adults are the snowflake generation?